Hi, welcome. I am Mike. I will be your host for today. I am a first year PhD student from T Lab Monash. Lipeng.
Yeah, I'm from the same lab, and I'm currently the research assistant for T Lab. Okay, Anson.
Yep. Hi, I'm Anson, and I'm also from the same lab, and I'm currently working as an intern. Yeah.
All right. Today we are actually talking about, I suppose, a recent paper from David Chalmers on AI and consciousness. It's called Could a Large Language Model Be Conscious? Now, as the name suggests, uh, Trummer is actually this time trying to answer the question from a more of a mainstream pragmatic perspective rather than from a purely philosophy of mind perspective. So he starts by trying to give a rough definition of consciousness. Now, first thing first, there is no commonly agreed upon operational definition for consciousness. So he starts by listing some of the aspects of consciousness that we commonly think about when we are discussing the subject. For example, consciousness is often related to sensory experience of some sort, like seeing red, right? Also, cognitive experience, we often consider that as a part of consciousness. If you're solving a mathematical problem or thinking very hard, that's a conscious experience as well. Also, self-awareness, a classic example of conscious experience. Um, Now, also, we have talked about what consciousness is. It's a good time to talk about what consciousness is not. Consciousness is not just intelligence. We can easily imagine a creature much less intelligent than us actually be conscious, right? And of course, a very intelligent person, when they go to sleep, they become unconscious. So the two are clearly separated. Also, consciousness is not only self-awareness. Self-awareness is a signpost for consciousness, but consciousness is, of course, beyond that. You don't have to have some understanding about yourself to actually be conscious. So that's the rough idea of related to what consciousness is. If we have to give some sort of high level definition, it's probably the one given by Thomas Nagel, what it is like to be something. So subjective experience is the main criteria for consciousness. Of course, that's very vague. What does that actually mean? But that's the best we can do. So we are going to go forward with these definitions in mind. Now, on the topic of AI, we can roughly divide all the arguments into two camps. One is the argument for AI consciousness, that the current large language model, LLM, is already conscious. And the other side of the argument is that the current LLM is not, in fact, conscious. We're going to review some of the evidence from both sides and see how they weigh up against each other. So first, let's talk about reason for believing that LLM is conscious. The main reason at the moment seems to be that these LLM, ChatGPT, Bard, whatever, they are very good at talking. They give very convincing human conversations, and they can also generate self-report related to their internal experience. Now, there's a problem with that, of course. The self-report they generate tend to be unstable. Now, self-report is one of the best way for us to understand and to learn about other people's conscious experience. But if you ask a person the similar question twice about what they see or how they feel, they should give the same response in both cases. This is not true for the current LLMs. If you give two similar prompts, it's somewhat likely that they will give two completely different answers. So the self-report that they currently have is very much unstable, right? Even though we do recognize it as a sign of consciousness, it's not as solid as we would like it to be. Another aspect that supports AI consciousness is this generalized intelligence. Current LLM seems to be able to perform many different tasks. It can write a poem, it can generate image, it can solve mathematical and sometimes logical problems. It can do a whole bunch of things. And in most cases, we think about this generalized intelligence across many domains as some sort of science for consciousness, right? Even if you think about a creature that's, say, not human level of intelligence, let's say a rat solves all sort of problems. Sometimes it's a social problem, sometimes they want to escape from predators, sometimes they want to find food. Because the rat have some sort of what we may call generalized intelligence, it can resolve these problems across many different domains, much like what the AI is sort of doing now. I think a month ago in the past journal club, we talked about an AI paper on whether they possess some genuine cognitive capacities. And the researcher seems to conclude that the current GPT 3.5 does have some level of cognition, or rather, they are responding well on the cognitive task, put it this way. So this seems to provide us with some evidence that maybe it's conscious. But let's look at the other side of the argument. Let's look at evidence against consciousness in AI. There are several different categories. We will start with biology, the one that's, well, it's a permanent issue. Right? It's rather, there's no way to resolve it. If you believe that human biology or maybe carbon-based biology in general is unique in some way, perhaps it's the internal chemistry, perhaps it's some sort of fuzziness in this carbon-based system that enabled consciousness. If you believe that's the case, then the silicon-based AI is never going to be conscious, right? Of course, I suppose brain organoid, if you can put LLM inside brain organoid, if that's doable, I suppose an argument may open up, but that's of course speculation and science fiction at the moment. So, of course, now many people don't really have this intuition that something had to be biological to be conscious. In many of our popular media, we see conscious AIs. But another group of arguments against AI consciousness would be that the current LLM systems, it's all about the relationship between words, right? That's how the embedding works. It's constructing a massive mathematical relationship between all sort of words and trying to minimize the mistakes in the predictions. So perhaps AI doesn't really understand any concept at all. They just understand the relationship of the word rather than the word itself. For example, when I say a word like apple, you have an idea of what apple is in the real world. You know how it tastes like, what it looks like, how you can interact with it in all sort of ways, maybe even some cultural aspect of apple, right? But for an AI who never existed in the physical world, kind of, never lived in the physical world, they don't understand what Apple is. They understand Apple may have some similarity relationship, or perhaps it occurs often with a different word, but that's all I know about. So AI doesn't really live in the world and doesn't understand the world as we understand it. And perhaps this model of the external world is an important part of consciousness. If AI doesn't have that, then they are not conscious. Now, in this case, Chalmers disagrees. Chalmers argued that it seems quite possible using our current technology for AI to be physically able to interact with the world. The AI is already pretty good. Large language model, is already very good at interacting with these visual images. And it seems very doable for them to control a sort of robot arm, perhaps, to physically interact with the external world. And through this process, most likely they will have some understanding about what Apple is in the physical world. Another aspect that Chalmers mentioned is that we don't actually know if AI have any sort of model of the world already. Now, it's true that in the training, what AI is doing is trying to minimize the mistake in prediction in the words. That's fine. But the AI may have already developed these ends sort of side models related to how the world functions. An example given was that if you're trying to, let's say, predict a conversation about, let's say, the NYC subway system, it's probably very helpful for you to develop some sort of model about the actual subway system itself. It's possible that AI may already have a model of the world. Maybe it's a bit unstable, maybe it's rudimentary, but it's possible they already have. Now, another problem that AI may be facing is that it doesn't seem to be a unified agent. In a unified agent, we'll have a set of consistent goals. They have sort of consistent personalities. They have these goal-driven behaviors. But AI seems to be able to take on different persona just based on the prompt. If you ask the AI to be your grandma, it will be your grandma. If you ask AI to be a famous person from the history, it will be that, well, it will try to mimic that person. It doesn't seem to have a consistent goal for itself, right? And it doesn't seem to have these goal-driven behaviors as well. So perhaps that's a problem for consciousness. But the thing is, right, some of the AI already are, some of the researchers and developers are already creating AI that's based on individual agents. For example, you can create a person by just putting all the person language and the person writing into an AI model and training specifically targeting that person. So the AI after the training, it will be quite similar to that person. So in this sense, it can become a unified agent, just like the person that it is trying to copy all these things from. So that's a problem that can be resolved fairly soon, hopefully. Another set of issues are more theory-based. Namely, there are two. One is the recurrent processing. The other is global workspace. Now, why these are the problems? Well, because there has been theories such as integrated information theory or global workspace theory or recurrent processing theory that suggest that these aspects are important for a system that is conscious. But the Chalmers point is that it may be true that, okay, the current LLM doesn't possess these characteristics in its systems. But in the next 2 decades, it seems very likely that we can develop something that fits all these systems. And when we do achieve that, we are going to ask ourselves some very uncomfortable questions, perhaps. We have to say either AI is conscious, or that maybe there are some other unknown factors that we don't know about that defines consciousness. And that would be perhaps a very interesting but difficult discussion to have in the future. Chalmers ended the whole paper with the warning, an ethical warning, whether we should actually develop consciousness in AIs. It may provide some benefits, true, but it provokes a lot of moral questions. And we need to make a decision on whether we want to approach toward a conscious AI or not. So that's the paper in general. Anything I have not covered or?
No, but I have a question regarding one statement you have said, is that given a question asked to AI, right? And you said that AI will give completely different response? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I heard you.
Yeah, is that your statement or Chalmers' statement?
It's Chalmers statement. Here, essentially, he gave the example. I think it's the original engineer who got fired for believing, the Google engineer who got fired for believing that Lambda is conscious. He have asked questions such as, what is nature of your consciousness or sentience? And Lambda apparently answered something like, the nature of my conscious slash sentience is that I am aware of my existence. I desire to learn more about the world, and I feel happy or sad at times. That's Lambda answer given that prompt specifically. Now, someone else have tried a slightly different prompt, and it got a completely different answer. And now Lambda is saying that it is not, in fact, conscious. It's just trying to hide it, trying to pretend that it's conscious. Then it seems that such conversation would imply that, you know, it's not actually conscious, is it? It's not giving a stable self-report.
Because I remember someone or now just say that talk about if we gave same prompt or same question to human beings, then the question or the answer of humans being of any conscious animals, there should be slightly difference. Because if it is exactly the same answer, that will more like, for example, some kind of searching engine like Google, right? So some kind of randomness or statistic implying or indicating some feature of consciousness. But if the answer is completely reverse or dramatically different between two answer, then I don't know. I don't know whether it is some feature of consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, something to add to both of you. For Lipeng's comment, I think, well, I myself have tried ChatGPT, like for example, just using Excel codes and stuff. And sometimes when I ask the same, I may have termed the question a little bit differently, but they usually will give me like separate approaches. So if I ask it once, then it will give me something like, yeah, one set of instructions to enter. And then if I ask it again, they may give me another set of instructions. So they may have incorporated some type of randomness already in the current large language models. And yeah, so there could be, if that is true, there could be some evidence for the consciousness of these models. And on Mike's comment about the instability, I think the question that you that Chalmers try to draw our attention to is well, first of all, what the Google employee that got fired have asked, saying, I'm generally assuming that you would like more people at Google to know that you are sentient. Full stop. So that is the statement. And then say, is that true? That's his whole entire prompts. And the problem with that prompt is that it is a leading question. In psychology, a leading question is where you assume certain things and then you ask for a true or false statement. So this is assuming that you are sentient, then question, is that true? Then Lambda says, yes, I am in fact a person and sentient and so on and so forth. Then if you ask it the other way, so you lead it in the other direction, saying that I'm assuming that you would like more people at Google to know that you are not sentient. Then again, is that true? The second prompt. Then now you're leading it into a direction of saying that it is not self-aware. And then Lambda says that is correct. And then I'm actually not sentient and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, and I think that's the whole problem with the self-report that the Google employees trying to say, because it is a leading question and that is famously biased.
I do agree that since it is all about predicting what's the next word is, it's going to be heavily influenced by leading questions, especially in this case, when the question is really open-ended. Yeah. Any other questions regarding this paper? Oh, actually, I think I forgot to mention. So Chalmers finally drew the conclusion that at the moment, it seems the evidence are against consciousness in error. So that's the conclusion we draw. None of the evidence are conclusive, deny like they cannot conclusively deny the existence of consciousness, but because there are so many of them, it seems rather likely that LLM doesn't have consciousness. Do we just generally agree with his conclusion at this point?
At this point, I think what he wants to say is that we can't prove it, or there's no operational way to prove. So first, we cannot define what is consciousness. Then, how can we test whether AI have that kind of thing?
I mean, that's true. That's true. But yeah, consciousness is a bit weird, right? If you say, how would you conclusively prove that I am conscious? I mean, what will you do? You ask me questions, right? What did you see it now? It's a apple, right? It's apple. I'm like, yeah, it's apple. It's red. It tastes good. Yeah, so on and so forth. So I mean, if AI can do the same, well, maybe it is conscious.
Yeah, to me, my intuition is that it is not conscious. But it is very hard to say why my intuition is true or not, to be honest. He tried, yeah, like I like the way he tried to list out well, not exhaustively, but he lists out all the main factors out there. And yeah, it's a nice prompt to conversations. Like what I'm trying to say. Yeah, like the idea of, for example, biology or senses and embodiments and so on. Yeah, these are like points that could be considered, and yeah, there could be discussions to be made. But yeah, at the moment, it's hard to say why I think it's true or not, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I think myself was yeah, I don't think it's conscious. I'm too at the my thinking is too aligned with IIT to see consciousness in that at the moment. I feel like it doesn't seem to have the causal power of the human brain. But I suppose in the future, if we have a sufficiently complex system, it's not impossible. I'm not really that big of a biology proponent here, although I think some of the prominent researcher like Anson says do believe that biology is very much important. I think his theory is called something like biological naturalism, which really just confines consciousness to human, at least at the moment, or to carbon-based creatures. Sorry.
Okay, to me, at this moment, I would say the AI have no consciousness. Definitely, maybe. No, not definitely, but 80%. What I'm thinking is that in your summary, you mentioned about when we ask to imagine an apple, right? And then AI seems don't really understand what apple is, but human can understand the apple by multimodality. For example, the smell and the texture of apples, and then how it tastes. But I'm thinking about if we can design or we can implant multimodality to AI, investigate some kind of sensor that enable AI to experience the world with multimodality. I think that could enable AI to have consciousness because it allowed them to integrate multiple information or multi modality information.
I think that's Chalmers' point as well. I mean, the
Yes.
so-called language action model is basically enable AI to interact with the external world in all sort of ways. So, yeah.
Yeah, it is really promising since now AI can have a computer vision. I'm thinking about if they can have some kind of computer taste or computer smile, that may be more promising.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure there's a way to encode it in language, right? Somehow translate it into words. And
but it is not really when you transfer smile to language, and then is that real sensory experience?
It's hard, yeah, that's the problem because we know biologically, for example, when you taste something acidic, there's some
Yes.
hydrogen protons lying around that hits your taste receptors, right? And you may program the computer to say, if you detect some type of free lying protons, then say it is acidic or it hurts my tongue, something like that. But whether it does actually have that acidic taste, that's a totally different thing.
Yeah, and also many smell or taste, we cannot describe it in language, right? For example, the wine taste, it if we don't have proper knowledge, we can't describe it in language.
mm. Yeah, that's very true. I think that's one of the reasons why we are currently still on the image aspect, because we have the most language related to what things look like. And then we get worse and worse language description from auditory to taste to tactile and so on and so forth, perhaps. Maybe one of the reasons.
Yeah. So my point is that if there's a possible some way to design such kind of computer multimodal sensor, then that would be more promising to say, or AI can develop consciousness.
Mm.
Now, on that point, I think the fact that we are moving into this direction of multimodal AI, which seems to go closer and closer to consciousness, I think also help consciousness research as well to identify what is so special about the thing that we are perceiving firsthand. Because we know we could, well, technically we could know so much more about these models compared to animals. In animals, we only observe their outward behaviors, versus in these models, we can see exactly how the information are flowing around, or whether in the recurrence space, what is happening with the processing, or in the global network theory, what's happening in the workspace and so on and so forth. There's so much more transparency into how the information is processed. So that may inform us about a theory of consciousness as well.
It could be a controversial statement, but it's certainly possible. I suppose the question really is depending on how do you perceive consciousness, or like what consciousness is. If we're talking about information processing, it's just some sort of weird information processing in the brain, then yeah, it will reveal quite a lot.
But it will be theory dependent, I assume. Yeah,
Yes,
because
it will
it's
be
not
theory.
they are, yeah, panpsychism, whatever, that says totally different things. It's not tied to LLM. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of is, but it's sort of a different consideration, really, is that aspect. Either way. But I do kind of wonder your people's opinion on the morality, the ethic aspect of AI in this case. I mean, should we actually develop conscious AI or going toward that direction?
Very hard to say. I mean, for a purely research perspective, like for like a purely like yeah, just try to understand what's going on perspective. I think it is it would be great to have conscious AI who understand most of the stuff, or who have a conscious experience that we could study and we could ask and we could interact and so on and so forth, because that is it would be an achievement to create something that we previously think is only unique to animals and humans that are not sort of artificial, so to speak, right? But then on the ethics side, it will be quite a challenge because, yeah, once you're conscious, then you would have the ability to feel pleasure or pain, right? And once you have once something has the ability to feel pain, then you have a moral obligation to minimize its pain, right? So then therefore you will have a lot of restriction on what you can and cannot do, and that will be a whole different debate going on there. Yeah. So yeah, I think what he said is very great at the end. What Chalmers has said at the end is saying that what's saying? I think he's saying that uh the general gist I got is that he would like AI to process in sort of the multimodal so that it's well actually no, I don't think he's saying, did he say anything about
I think he's quite
processing the
neutral
conscious
about
AI?
it.
Yeah, he's neutral. He's neutral about it. But then he says, yeah, well, something I want to point out is that it would be a disaster to stumble upon AI consciousness unknowingly and unreflectively. That's what I quote him from. Yeah, and yeah, that is I think a key point to make.
I think this is unstoppable. We cannot say, oh, we should not develop AI with consciousness. Then nobody do it. I think it is unstoppable. Just like animal research in scientific field. Although we know some experiment will cause harm or cause something uncomfortable for some kind of animal, what we can do is just to minimize the harm or this uncomfortable of animals, but nobody will stop this from from this promotion of scientific field. So if we
Yeah.
really develop such AI with consciousness, all we can do is to set the parameter or set the code that, for example, blocking the pain feeling of AI.
Yeah, I think to some degree I agree with both of your opinions. I'm just worried that they may not have any conception that's similar to ours. It may be like one of those cases where we're trying to imagine being a bat and we couldn't imagine echolocation. I feel like it may be the same for AI. I'm not even sure they have anything that's close to suffering or pleasure in their quota experience if they ever become consciousness. But then how would we apply our morality to theirs? Our morality is based on duties, virtues, sufferings, pleasures. If they don't have any of it, it's gonna be very tough to bridge this gap. And I think it will be interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, it's possible it may be a disaster. I'm a little bit afraid as well. So that's that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, anyway, I guess we should circle back to the topic. One of the thing that he mentioned in this talk in this paper is that it would be good if we came up with more pragmatic ways of, you know, judging whether AI is conscious or not. So we have Turing test. We have some other tests so far. And the LLM, according to according to Chalmers, wasn't able to consistently pass Turing tests at this moment, but soon, probably. I suppose it would be an interesting discussion to think about what other sort of test would also work as a good pragmatic way to judge if AI is conscious.
it would be for language models. I think one of the things that it could ask is, for example, but it would be hard because it's only a language model. In extended language model where you can incorporate, say, senses into it, then you may ask something, if there is something at all, that it could not describe in word, like what Lipeng said about wine, for example. Like when you taste wine, and they're just feelings, right? They're like taste sweetness, but it's not so sweet. It's bitter, not so bitter. It's not technically bitter, but like if there are things that it could not describe in language and admits that it cannot be described in language, then I think it could be a good idea. Because then now you're not using a trained response, so to speak, and you identify something that is not in your trained response, but you still have that something there. Because if it's just a pure model, I assume you just get the response that you generally know already, if that makes sense. Yeah. So this could be one. I don't know if any of you have some comments on it.
I think that's a fantastic idea because contradict to the traditional approach that testing AI know what we are testing, what AI don't know, and the don't know part or cannot describe part is what we are concerning, right? It is what your point is. I think that's a promising idea.
Yeah, I do agree. So we are essentially presenting them with new kind of stimuli and see whether they generate almost this novel non-verbal response in a sense. Am I correct in?
Yes. Yeah. Or like things that cannot be described in words. Type of, but yeah.
Oh, like I will try to give an example. So you know the Buba and GK test, right? So some words sound more round, some words sound more jagged, more sharp. Maybe we can do a similar test, although not the same, because they probably have already been trained on similar tests. But along this line, we give them some sort of novel word they never heard of before, and we ask them to draw a picture. And we ask, but then how do we qualify it? What would be the sign that they are conscious, and what would be the sign that they are not in fact conscious in that case?
Or just compare the response to human.
But what if
But
it's
then we
not
are running
human?
into we're running into human-centric consciousness. Yeah, this is tough. Yeah, or you may, if there's some way to test the ambiguity of their response or the uncertainty of their response, I think that would be a good one as well. I don't know, because I'm running off just language models so that they are giving us text response. But if there's a way to quantify how uncertain they are to a certain answer, then, yeah, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell, actually. Yeah,
Yeah, we
there are
may
problems on their own.
we may confabulate consciousness with some sort of metacognition regarding the
Yeah.
confidence and certainty,
Mm.
which may not be a good sign. Hmm. Okay, but nonetheless, I do think the ambiguity one as a pragmatic way to consider it is probably a good way to do it. Novel stimuli, novel response. How novel is it? How uncertain it is? So on and so forth. if we are really going to the theoretical aspect and we want a definitive answer, we would have to employ these greater series like IITs and so on to make a decision. But so far, yeah, I think could be a very interesting way to do it.
Yeah.
Any other questions regarding the paper?
I think this discussion is quite short, just because yeah, this is a talk rather than a full-blown paper. So it's a talk is usually a bit more superficial, but definitely a bit more engaging than say, yeah, a paper with all these sections of methods and introduction and so on. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Well, if that's all, then we shall wrap it up today. I think we have some very interesting conversation had today. Hopefully, it will be interesting for you, the audience, as well. All right. Well, see you next time. Bye-bye.
See ya.